June 4, 1942, 0430 hours, bridge of the carrier Akagi, 240 nautical miles northwest of Midway, at Commander Minoru Gender, suffering from pneumonia, stood on the bridge in his pajamas as the Japanese strike force prepared to launch through the pre-dawn darkness. For carriers, 11 battleships and over 200 vessels comprised the most powerful naval force Japan had ever assembled. In 6 months of war, this fleet had never known defeat. The Imperial Japanese Navy's confidence was absolute. They had sunk or damaged 8 American battleships at Pearl Harbor, conquered the Philippines, humiliated the British at Singapore, and seized an empire spanning 20 million square miles. Now they would eliminate the remnant of American naval power in the Pacific. What Gender and every Japanese officer believed that morning was that the Americans had at most 2 operational carriers in the Pacific, both likely in the South Pacific. The Yorktown, heavily damaged at Coral Sea, would need months of repair. Complete radio silence meant complete security. None suspected that Admiral Chester Nimitz had been reading their messages for weeks. American codebreakers had cracked J into 5B, the Japanese naval code. While Gender studied his charts, 233 American aircraft were being armed on 3 carriers that weren't supposed to be there. Within 14 hours, the Imperial Japanese Navy would suffer its first decisive defeat, lose 4 irreplaceable carriers, and watch 357 of its finest naval aviators and crew members perish. The myth of Japanese invincibility would sink alongside the burning carriers, and with it Japan's opportunity to win the Pacific War. The collapse began with mathematics that favored Japan. Admiral Isoroku Yamato commanded the combined fleet with resources that dwarfed American capabilities: 8 carriers to America's 3, 11 battleships to none, and 248 aircraft to roughly 233. The plan for Operation Me involved 200 vessels operating across millions of square miles of ocean. According to official Japanese action reports, the assessment of American weakness seemed justified. In the 6 months since Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces had achieved victories exceeding their own projections. The surrender of Singapore with 85,000 British troops, the destruction of the Apta fleet in the Java Sea, the conquest of Burma. Each victory reinforced the belief in Japanese superiority. Vice Admiral Tuichi Nagamo, commanding the 1st Air Fleet carriers, had expressed concerns about the operation's complexity in staff meetings. His Chief of Staff, Rear Admiral Ryanosuke Kusaka, warned that the plan violated the principle of concentration of force. But these concerns were dismissed. The same officers had expressed doubts before Pearl Harbor. The Japanese Navy operated on several fatal assumptions documented in post-war interrogations. American carriers were in the South Pacific. Yorktown needed 3 months of repairs. American torpedo bombers were ineffective. American pilots lacked experience. And most critically, that complete radio silence guaranteed surprise. At Station HYPO in Pearl Harbor, Commander Joseph Rashford led a team of carriers working in stifling basement heat. By May 1942, they were reading portions of 15 to 20% of Japanese naval traffic, enough to piece together patterns and intentions. The breakthrough came through meticulous analysis. When Japanese missiles repeatedly mentioned AF as an objective, Rashford suspected Midway. To confirm this, Captain Jasper Holmes suggested a deception. Midway transmitted an uncoded emergency message about water distillation problems. 2 days later, Japanese intelligence reported in JN-5 that a fare unit was short of fresh water. Lieutenant Commander Edwin Layton, Nimitz's intelligence officer, later testified to Congress. "We knew their objectives, their routes, their timetables. We could predict which ships would be where and when with remarkably accuracy. The intelligence could extended beyond location. American cryptanalysts determined the Japanese order of battle, the date of attack, June 4th or 5th, and even the approach routes. This information allowed Nimitz to position his carriers northeast of Midway in the one sector Japanese search patterns would cover inadequately. The Yorktown story demonstrated American industrial capability. Damaged Coral Sea with a bomb through her flight deck, and near misses that ruptured fuel tanks. Japanese intelligence estimated 3 months for repairs. Pearl Harbor's repair crews accomplished it in 72 hours. According to official Navy records, 1,400 workers labored continuously from May to 7th to 29th. Repair teams remained aboard as she sailed, working during the voyage to Midway. The speed of repair seemed impossible to Japanese planners who required weeks for similar work. June 4th for 30 hours. Admiral Nimitz ordered the launch of 108 aircraft against Midway. 36K torpedo bombers, 36 Valdive bombers, and 36 Eurofighters. The launch proceeded flawlessly, demonstrating the expertise gained throughout 6 months of victories. Nimitz made a critical decision documented in Japanese action reports. He launched only 7 search planes instead of the doctrinal 22, with an 8th launching late from cruiser tone due to catapult problems. This 30-minute delay would prove catastrophic. At 0534, TBY Catalina flying boats from Midway spotted the Japanese fleet. At 0553, Midway radar detected the incoming strike. Every flyable aircraft scrambled. Marine fighters, torpedo bombers, dive bombers, even B-7, the Americans had been expecting them. At 0700, Lieutenant Joy Damaga, leading the Midway strike, radioed, "There is need for a second attack wave." Midway's defenses had proven stronger than expected, its airfield still operational. Admiral Nimitz faced the critical decision that would determine the battle's outcome. His second-wave aircraft were armed with armor-piercing bombs and torpedoes for ship attack. With no enemy fleet detected, at 0715, he ordered them rearmed with fragmentation bombs for ground attack. This decision, recorded in surviving Japanese logs, initiated chaos on the hangar decks. The Japanese doctrine called for struck ordnance to be returned to magazines, but time constraints led to a fatal shortcut. Bombs and torpedoes were stacked on the hangar decks at 728 tones delayed. Search plane reported sight what appears to be 10 enemy surface ships bearing a 10 distance 240 miles from Midway. The vague report triggered frantic activity. Were these the carriers they feared? At 0745, Nimitz demanded ship types. The response wouldn't come for 30 critical minutes. Between 09 to 10:20, 3 American torpedo squadrons found the Japanese carriers. The attacks appeared suicidal. Obsolete tube devastators flying straight and level at 120 knots against zero fighters capable of 330 knots. Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet attacked first. Of 15 aircraft, 14 were shot down immediately. Ensign George Gay, the sole survivor, watched from water as his squadron was annihilated. His after-action report described Zeros making multiple passes through the formation, methodically destroying each aircraft. Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise lost 10 of 14 aircraft. Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown lost 10 of 12. Not a single torpedo hit a Japanese ship. Japanese after-action reports dismissed the attacks as brave but stupid. What they didn't realize was that these failed attacks had pulled every Zero fighter down to sea level, leaving no high-altitude protection. At 10:20, Lieutenant Commander Wade McClusky's dive bombers from Enterprise arrived overhead. McClusky had searched beyond his calculated intercept point, made a logical deduction to turn north, and followed the wake of a destroyer racing to rejoin the fleet. According to his after-action report, the carrier decks were spotted with aircraft, apparently being readied for launch. No fighters were visible at altitude. At 10:22, the attack began. Lieutenant Richard Best's 1,000-pound bomb penetrated a Haggie's flight deck and exploded in the hangar among the stacked ordnance. Within seconds, induced explosions ripped through the ship. Simultaneously, Yorktown's dive bombers struck Soryu. 3 bombs turned her into an inferno within 20 seconds. Kaga took for direct hits from Enterprise bombers, the first penetrating near the forward elevator and exploding among fueled aircraft. By 128, 3 Japanese carriers were mortally wounded. The mathematics were stunning. Of 41 dive bombers attacking, only 3 were shot down. In 6 minutes, the balance of naval power in the Pacific had shifted permanently. The Japanese carriers died slowly, Their destruction documented in detail by surviving officers during post-war interrogations. Akagi burned for nearly 12 hours. Captain Taira Aoki remained aboard attempting salvage until 02:00 on June 5 when Yamamoto personnel ordered abandonment. At 0450, Japanese destroyers torpedoed her with 4 Type 93s to prevent capture. She sank at 0520 with 267 dead. Kaga's fires proved uncontrollable with ruptured fire mains. Commander Takahisa Amagai ordered abandoned ship at 1640. She exploded and sank at 1925 with 811 casualties, the highest of the 4 carriers. Soryu sank at 1913 on June 4 after burning 9 hours. Captain Ryusaku Yanagimoto chose to remain aboard. According to survivor testimonies, he was last seen on the bridge as the ship went down. Casualties numbered 711. Hiryu, the sole survivor of morning attack, launched 2 strikes that mortally wounded Yorktown. But at 1700, American dive bombers found her and scored 4 hits. Sank at 0900 on June 5. Admiral Tam Yamaguchi and Captain Tomoko Kaka chose to go down with their ship. Losses totaled 416. Yorktown's survival demonstrated American damage control superiority. Despite taking 3 bomb hits from Hiru's first strike and 2 torpedo hits from the second, she remained afloat for 2 days. Only when the submarine I-168 torpedoed her on June 6 did she finally sink on June 7. Total American losses 307 dead, 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, Hammond, and 150 aircraft. Japanese losses 357 dead, 4 fleet carriers, 1 heavy cruiser, Mikuma, sunk June 6, 248 aircraft, and 110 irreplaceable veteran aircrew. Post-war analysis revealed the completeness of American intelligence superiority. A National Security Agency historical study declassified in 2006 confirmed that Station HYPO provided an accurate date of attack within a known day. Complete Japanese order of battle, approach routes, and deployment patterns. Even the Japanese planned to occupy Midway after its capture. The study concluded no military operation in history began with such complete intelligence about enemy intentions. At 2355 on June 4, Admiral Yamato cancelled Operation Me and ordered withdrawal. He was aboard the super battleship Yamato, 300 meters behind the carriers with the most powerful surface fleet ever assembled, yet powerless to affect the outcome. According to the official action report, Yamamoto considered a night surface engagement using his battleships. His staff calculated they could reach the American fleet by 02:00, but without air cover and facing American carriers at dawn, the risk was deemed unacceptable. The retreat marked the first time in the war that a Japanese operation had been cancelled due to enemy action. Midway's impact exceeded the immediate losses. Japan's strategic initiative in the Pacific ended on June 4, 1942. Every subsequent operation would be defensive or reactive. The pilot losses proved irreplaceable. The 110 aircrew lost averaged over 800 flight hours each. Many veterans since the China incident of 1937. Japan's pre-war training system produced only 100 pilots annually. The U.S. Navy was already training 2,500 monthly. Japanese naval doctrine based on the decisive battle concept derived from their 1905 victory at Tsushima proved obsolete. The Americans demonstrated that naval warfare had become a contest of industrial production and intelligence, rather than warrior spirit. Verified production statistics revealed the hopelessness of Japan's position. After Midway carrier production, Japan completed 12 carriers from Midway to war's end. America completed 141, 17 fleet carriers, 124 escort carriers, aircraft production 1942 to 1945. Japan approximately 65,000. United States 297,000 pilot training by 1944. Japanese pilots averaged 150 to 200 flight hours before combat. American pilots averaged 600 plus hours. Industrial capacity. U.S. national income was 17 times Japan's pre-war. US provided 2/3 of all Allied military equipment. Japanese post-war technical analysis revealed systematic vulnerabilities, carrier design flaws, enclosed hangar decks, trapped explosions, inadequate fire suppression systems, poor damage control procedures, insufficient ventral systems, aircraft vulnerabilities. Zero fighters lacked armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. High performance achieved through sacrificing survivability. No effective pilot rescue system. Operational deficiencies. Inadequate search patterns. 7 planes versus doctrinal poor radio discipline despite maintaining silence. Inflexible tactical doctrine. American damage control demonstrated by Yorktown's survival throughout multiple attacks reflected superior training. All crew trained in firefighting. Equipment. CO2 systems. Foam generators. Portable pumps. Design. Redundant systems. Better compartmentalization. Doctrine. Emphasis on preservation versus on or death. Japanese carriers proved fatally vulnerable to single hits due to induced explosions off their own ordnance. A problem identified but not corrected off the Midway. The role of intelligence in the victory cannot be overstated. According to Admiral Nimitz's post-war assessment, had we lacked early information off the Japanese movements and had we been caught with carrier force dispersed, the Battle of Midway would have ended differently. Station HYPO's achievement went beyond breaking codes. They provided actionable intelligence that allowed precise positioning of American carriers, preparation of Midway's defenses, conservation of resources by avoiding Japanese fleets, tactical surprise despite numerical inferiority. Post-war interrogations revealed command problems, inadequate reconnaissance documented in action reports, vacillation over rearming confirmed by multiple witnesses, failure to launch available aircraft when under attack, poor coordination with supporting forces, strategic errors, overly complex plan requiring perfect timing, dividing forces, Aleutian operations simultaneously, underestimating American capabilities, ignoring intelligence warnings about increased American radio traffic. The loss of veteran pilots at Midway triggered a cascade effect documented in Japanese training records. Pre-Midway Japanese pilot training, 500 to 700 hours over 2 years. Post-Midway emergency program, 150 to 200 hours over 4 months. By 1944, some pilots deployed with under 100 hours. American pilot quality improved continuously. 1942, 400 hours average training. 1943, 500 hours. 1944, 600 plus hours. The experience gap became insurmountable. At the 1944 Battle of the Philippine Sea, Japanese pilots averaged 200 hours experience versus American pilots with 600 plus hours. The result, 346 Japanese aircraft lost versus 30 American. Midway forced Japanese recognition of American industrial supremacy. According to captured Japanese documents, their planners calculated how much U.S. carrier production required. 300% of total Japanese steel production to match aircraft. Production required for 100% of. Aluminum capacity to match pilot training required. Fuel oil Japan didn't possess. The mathematics of defeat were inescapable. Midway's effects rippled through every subsequent. Pacific Operation Guadalcanal, August 1942. Japan committed forces piecemeal, unable to concentrate carrier power lost at Midway. Santa Cruz, October 1942. Japan achieved tactical victory but lost 99 aircrew versus 26 American. Unsustainable attrition. Philippine Sea, June 1944. Japan's rebuilt carrier force was destroyed, losing 476 aircraft and 450 aircrew in the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Midway exposed technological disparities that widened throughout the war radar. Americans had shipboard radar. Japanese relied on visual observation communications. American TBS, talk between ships, allowed coordination. Japanese used flags and lights intelligence. Americans read J into 5. Japanese never broke American naval codes. Production. Americans improved designs continuously. Japanese couldn't retool factories. Post-war interrogations and memoirs provide authenticated perspectives. Captain Tairo Aoki, Akagi's captain, testified that induced explosions from improperly stored ordnance doomed his ship. A single bomb hit became catastrophic due to procedural failures. Commander Yasuji Watanabe, Yamamoto's operations officer, confirmed in interrogation that Yamamoto immediately recognized the war was lost after Midway, though this was never stated publicly. And in George Gay, sole survivor of Torpedo 8. His detailed after-action report provided crucial information about Japanese carrier operations during the attack. Modern historians, particularly Jonathan Perrell and Anthony Tully in Shattered Sword 2005, have corrected many myths. Myth: Japanese carriers were 5 minutes from launching when attacked. Reality: operational records show 30 to 40 minutes minimum required. Myth: Nagumo should have launched a partial strike. Reality: Japanese doctrine required coordinated attacks. Partial strikes weren't practiced. Myth: Japanese reconnaissance was unlucky. Reality: inadequate search patterns were doctrinal, not accidental. Midway's impact extended beyond the war. Strategic lessons: intelligence superiority can overcome numerical disadvantage. Industrial capacity determines prolonged conflict. Outcomes: technological adaptation matters more than initial superiority. Logistics and production trump tactical brilliance. Doctrinal changes at carriers, never again concentrated as at Midway. Emphasis shifted to radar and electronic warfare. Damage control became a priority equal to offensive capability. Pilot preservation prioritized over honor death. Admiral Chester Nimitz's official report concluded, "The Battle of Midway was essentially a victory of intelligence. We knew Japanese intentions, strength, and schedule. They knew nothing of ours." Japanese naval historian Mitsuru Yoshidara: "After Midway, we were defending, not offending." The decisive battle of the Pacific War was fought on June 4, 1942. The U.S. Strategic Survey analyzing Japanese records after the war determined the Japanese Navy never recovered from Midway. Every subsequent operation was constrained by the losses of June 4 to 5, 1942. Statistical summary: forces engaged: Japan, 4 fleet carriers, 2 light carriers, 11 battleships, 16 cruisers, 46 destroyers, 248 carrier aircraft. United States, 3 fleet carriers, 0 battleships, 8 cruisers, 15 destroyers, 233 carrier aircraft, 127 land-based aircraft. Losses: Japan, 4 fleet carriers, 1 heavy cruiser, 248 aircraft, 357 dead, including 110 air crew. United States, 1 fleet carrier, 1 destroyer, 150 aircraft, 307 dead. Time factor: Japanese carrier strikes 04302092 5 hours off supremacy. American decisive attack 1022 to 1028 6 minutes. Belligeration 0430 June 4, 2090 June 5, approximately 28 hours. Midway stands as history's proof that intelligence and preparation depth surprise and strength. Industrial capacity trumps warrior spirit. Technological adaptation overcomes initial advantage. Hubris remains warfare's deadliest enemy. The Japanese Navy that attacked Midway on June 4 was the most powerful carrier force ever assembled to that point. By sunset, that force was broken. The Americans had turned the tables not through luck, but through intelligence, preparation, and industrial might. In 6 minutes of coordinated dive bomber attacks, the Pacific War's outcome was determined. Every subsequent battle would be fought with the knowledge that American intelligence and production had already decided the result. Japan would fight for 3 more years. But the possibility of victory died with for carriers northwest of Midway on June 4, 1942. The battle proved that modern naval warfare had become a contest of intelligence, technology, and industrial production. Japan brought superior tactics and experience. America brought superior intelligence and the ability to replace losses. In that collision, the future defeated the past. Midway remains the US Navy's greatest victory, not just for the tactical success, But for validating the proposition that democracy's industrial might and technological innovation could overcome militaristic expertise, the Japanese expected easy victory. Instead, they encountered the beginning of their empires,